Hi, my name is Craig Nakken. I'm a family therapist from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And in the first section, what we did was talk about how the illness of addiction affected people and started to affect the family. What I'd like to do in this section is to talk more specifically about how the illness of addiction spreads through the family, starts to affect other people, and in that sense starts to take over the family, and how things that used to be normal for family members now become abnormal in that sense. The way that I'm going to talk about this is I want us to think about and talk about channels of intimacy. That in this sense, if you look at it, part of us all have our own ego, and what we do is we go through life, and we go through life alone with our own egos, and what we do is we're kind of looking for others. We're looking to kind of meet up with somebody, try and find somebody, but there's a tension that we go through life with, whether I go through it alone or whether I go through it with another. Okay. And most of us had the experience where what we've done is gone out a date or something, and about 5-10 minutes into the date, we've decided it's much better to go it alone than with this person, okay? But every now and then what we're going to do is find somebody, and we really start to believe that we could have much more of a life with this person than without him. That in terms of what we were talking about earlier, that we could have more meaning with them than we could without him. So when we do that, one of the things that we set up is we start to set up this channel of intimacy. It's unseen, but it's very real. We can feel it between us. We can feel it being created. We can feel it when we're living in it. We can feel the energies and the things that it gives to us because of that. And I want us to think of it in that sense. Parents have it with their children. You know, that when you have a child and that, what's the first thing that you want to do is kind of stare into their eyes. Hold them, just stare into their eyes and kind of have some time with them in that way. I always use the example, my father, when my niece Jennifer was born, what you had to do is go to the hospital and go up to the mother, and the mother would give you a little card that you then took to the nursery room, and you held it up, and then they would bring the baby up, and you just kind of get to visit with the baby. And he would go in and spend some time. He'd just kind of go in and say to my sister, "Hi, how are you? Can I have the card?" And he'd get the card from me. He'd go to the nursery window, hold it there. They'd bring Jennifer up, and he stared at her for 2 hours. And he'd get done. He'd bring the card back to my sister and say, "Geez, it was really nice visiting you. I'll see you again tomorrow." Okay? And if you look at it, what he was doing there was building this relationship with a person. And we do that all the time. We're doing that in that way of building this channel. And when we finally, in a sense, say, this is the person that I want to be with, one of the things that we do is we come up with an agreement. And that agreement is very important because it answers in many ways the questions of why. Why are we together, and what we are going to be about? What are the types of things that we're going to try and create? So there's 3 parts to this agreement I want us to think of. The first is the formal part. That what we do is we create this formal agreement. It may be the vows that we have. It may be in a sense of things that we state, that I want to care for you, I want to be your best friend. I want these types of things with you, and I think we can do it together. The other thing we have is we have an informal thing, that as you spend time and develop an intimate relationship with people, you start to kind of know about their dreams, you kind of know about their hopes, and what you do is start to want to fulfill those. You want to see them happy, you want to bring happiness to them. Again, I use the example with my wife, that we had some friends who were going to go on a trip to Greece, and they were telling us about it, and her eyes just started to get big, and she was, "God, this is my dream vacation. I always wanted to go to Greece." I studied philosophy in college and those types of things, and God, they're going to go every place I ever dreamed of going, you know. So we said, "Well, let's go check the finances," and we could go, and we went on this wonderful vacation to Greece, you know, and she's on the hills of Delphi just crying, "Oh, it's better than I ever thought it could be," and she's having that great time. And my dream vacation was to go to China. Well, who became the keeper of my dream? It was her. And that's part of what you do is you work for each other in that sense. So she'd be saying, geez, when do you think we're going to get to China? Should we do that? Let's start saving some money for that, those types of things. And you work to help each other walk through and have a meaningful life. The other part of it, this agreement, is there's just some things that you assume. Most of us assume when we get in an intimate relationship that what it's going to do is be safe. We're going to assume that the other person will care about us. We also assume that there's going to be some troubles, but we also believe that we're going to make through it and find ways to kind of get to the other side, create a more meaningful relationship that way. Well, I want us to think of this because what I'll try and show later is how all of these things break down. For an example, like with the assumed one, I had a woman that I worked with, and she came in, her husband was a gambling addict, and she said, you know what he did? And I said, no. He said, he took the jewelry that my grandmother gave me and he pawned it off to sell it for his gambling debts, you know. And then she said, I should have known, you know. And I said to her, you're absolutely right. That was one of the first questions I asked my wife when we got engaged. When will you be stealing family heirlooms and selling them, okay? You know. And she got the message that I was saying there, that if she had assumed this, she would have never gone into this relationship. So she'd assumed safety. She'd assumed trust. And his illness took that away from him. This is what we call mutual vulnerability, to think of this part here. That in this channel, the rules are different. The rules are led by this agreement, and they're not led like we do in other relationships with our ego. That's one of the major subtle parts of this agreement, is that in the channel we leave our egos behind, and what we do is bring principles and the desire to help each other have a better life into that channel. If you look at it, if we do that successfully, things start to happen. If you look at it in this way, I'll use this one. If we create this channel, and in that sense, we start to live by that agreement and we live well, what's going to start to do is create byproducts. We'll create trust, we'll create respect, we'll create intimacy. I see intimacy as a byproduct, okay? We create care, we create love, actually. I think there's two types of love. I talk about it with my clients, that there's initial love where you fall in love with somebody, and then what there is there's created love where you have to create the love to take you to the next level in that way. I always use the metaphor that it's like you get the first tank of gas free, and then you've got to build the oil refinery to get yourself the rest of the way, okay? But if you do that successfully, what starts to take place here is the we starts to grow. Think of this is the domain of the me, so we each have a me, but what we're starting to do is create a we, and we want that to grow over time. We want to be able to build a we that we can rest into and find some comfort and find some pride in. So if you look at it, what takes place now is, in this sense, time. The element of time either becomes our friend or it becomes our foe. And let's take it, if it grows well, this channel will keep expanding in the sense until at some point there's actually much more of the channel, much more of the we than there is of the me. That you've been willing to sacrifice the ego to make something with others. Okay. Where I got taught about this a lot was, I love the story of who taught it to me, was this. I had to go over to my wife's family and meet them for the first time. You know, it's like, you know, when you're going to meet the family, that type of thing. And it was over on Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. And it was on the family farm, and it was, you know, a nice summer day. I think it was the 4th of July picnic and that. And what we did was have to go there, and I negotiated with my wife how long we'd be there. We'll only be there 4 hours, you know, because I'm all nervous. And I kind of kid that I wore green so I could blend in with the grass, because I just, you know, it was one of those types of days. So I'm looking around to where do I sit. And there's this lady who was around 70 years old, and she had this long flowing orange gown on, and she had a big orange hat to match just on her head. And she just looked eccentric as all get out, and just the type of person that I love in that. So I sat down next to her and started to kind of blend in with the grass, you know, and I'm thinking I got 3 hours and a half to go, 3 hours and 20 minutes to go. And all of a sudden, she nudges me. And she goes, hi, my name's Henrietta, I'm Jane's aunt. And she puts her hand out in that. And she's just this cutest lady. And the next thing out of her mouth is she says, see that cute guy over there? And she points across the yard to this man who's about this tall, totally bald, and pudgy as all get out, okay? She says, see that guy? That's my husband, Homer, okay? So it's like even their names, Homer and Henrietta, they'd grown together in that sense over time. And what was so beautiful about it is that their eyes made contact. He could tell that she was looking at him. They had that type of connection. And for the next 3-4 minutes, they just danced around here, having a conversation with each other with their eyes that nobody else was privileged to. But it was kind of what they had created in their life. And so I just had a wonderful day of sitting next to her, listening to her tell stories of how they made their marriage and different types of things like that. And I always get that towards the end of it, she kind of looks at me and says, I want to know the secret of a good marriage? I say, yeah, that's why I'm kind of talking with you. And she says, well, Homer was a casket salesman, so he's gone Monday through Friday. So we got to make the best of the weekends. Know what I mean? You know? And she was just that type of person. And it's like, did they not have tragedy in their life? No, they had tragedy. They had different things. They had things they had to struggle. But what they did was create a wonderful relationship together. And I want us to think of that in a sense, because everybody's doing that when they form together, and when they have a dream, everybody has a dream that they're trying to create. Addicts and their families have a dream also. So if you look at it, we've got this channel here, and I want us to think of what happens when addiction comes in. Okay? How is that going to change things? And if you look at it, it goes back to that issue that we were talking about, is do I go through it alone or do I go through it with another? Okay? And what takes place is there's this blockage that takes place right here. It's like over here, the wall comes down. If addiction came in here, you could look at it in this sense like the wall comes down and there's a blockage, and the person sets up another relationship with the object of their addiction. Okay? This person over here is going to sense that. They know that something's wrong. They don't just give up and go away at that time. What they do is come running down here, banging on the door. What's wrong? You don't talk to me anymore. You don't seem to care about me the same way you used to. You seem distant from me. You hear all those types of things. And if they bang long enough on the door, what happens is the door opens and out comes the addiction. Okay? And then they're in trouble, because then they get attacked. You know, don't you blame me for our relationship going bad. It's not my fault. If you treat me decently, if you'd care about me the way you used to, then we wouldn't have this problem. The only reason I drink is because of the way you treat me. And then there's a battle that goes on. And this person here comes back and they shut their door down. So they're kind of going, what's going on here? Geez, what's happening? So in this, if you look at it, what happens is this person over here has guilt. Okay? This person here has guilt. But they deal with it in different ways. The addict takes their guilt and goes usually and gets high. This person doesn't have that refuge, so what they usually do is they wrestle with it in their conscience. They'll feel bad about it, and at some point they usually go apologize. Okay? They go and try and make it work again. So they come down the channel, they knock on the door, they say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. You're right, I'm a little angry. Maybe it is some of the ways that I've been treating you. I'll try and do better. And they say, okay, thanks. We'll and you have some good time, but then you might say, but I really do worry about you drinking. Oh, God, are we going to bring that subject up again? Okay. So any mention of or any threat to the addiction will bring the addict out into this channel. It's an important thing to get, because that's going to change the relationship in a drastic way. If you look at it in this way, what happens now is a rule changes. The mutual vulnerability gets destroyed. Okay? That people aren't, in that sense, willing to risk anymore. Because if you risk, you're going to get hurt. If you care, you're going to get hurt. So part of what has to happen is the rules change, and you only go out into that channel and bring your ego. In the ways we were talking about in that first section, now you don't venture out into that channel unless you're coming from that drive for power. So you bring your power with you and you fight over everything. That's where we got that right or wrong that we talked of, because everything is broken down into that right or wrong aspect of it. It becomes very hard. The me starts to grow at the expense of the we. If you notice here, the me is getting larger and the we is getting smaller. When that happens, just think of what would happen if you had a dream, because people got together for a dream and you can feel that dream fading apart. You can feel the closeness that you once had or the dream you had starting to slip through your fingers. That's a very painful thing. Works well for the addiction because the addict can go get high, but it's very hard on the family members because they carry lots more pain that way. What happens next in the sense is it keeps clashing, the addiction's getting bigger in that sense, it's feeding, and at some point that channel becomes filled up. Just like before, it used to create byproducts, like we said, of trust and love and care. What it does now is create negative byproducts, mistrust, resentment, anger, fear, all those types of things keep getting produced until at some point this channel is blocked. Okay? And all that's there, and you're tied to this person in this negative way. You try and talk about things, but you can't ever seem to solve it. It always goes negative in that way, and it creates more pain, till the point you just start to shut down and you don't talk to each other anymore. Okay? And you just kind of sit in that and go one direction and one goes the other. What happens at that point, if you look at it, is mostly as you're tied together by this agreement that you made, but it doesn't work anymore. So it starts to feel more like a burden. It starts to feel more like a noose around your neck than it does a dream and a hope that you used to have. What we talk about and what we try and do in recovery is to work with this. What we try and do isn't to have everybody work through all of that pain, but what we try and do is help them come up with a new agreement. Okay? So that what they can do is, instead of having to go through every piece that had happened, every painful thing that happened, what we do is ask them to come up with a new agreement. What values, what principles do you want at the core of your marriage? And this takes time for families in recovery. It takes time to be able to create that, so what you can then do is have a new relationship that you can grow. Okay? So we'll ask people, have people sit down, what values do you want in your marriage? What values do you want? And when you find that common bond, then you create some of agreement with that. And one of the things I have my clients do is come up with that agreement and then say it to each other morning and night for 100 days. Okay. And we use 100 days because it takes about 100 days to create a new pathway in the brain. 90 meetings in 90 days is what the first treatment used to be. It's right around that type of thing where we build new pathways that have some staying power, that create that guilt. Because what we want to do is we want to create guilt when we're not acting in the way we should and when we're not treating people. Because all guilt is doing is telling us, get back to our values, get back to your values. You're a better person than this. Okay? And if done effectively, one of the things that we can do is start to grow that. And a person works their recovery programs, so in a sense they put distance and break this relationship here because we have to break that, then what the energy that used to go into that relationship can now go into this relationship. Okay? And is needed to create that. It gets put behind those values, gets put behind that agreement, and in doing so, you start to live, put those principles to action, and you get a relationship back. And eventually, you learn the skills again of how to talk through some of the issues. Or you just put some aside in that way because, it doesn't matter anymore. What we've done is we've gotten our relationship back. I can treat you decently, you can treat me decently, and that's all we wanted all along. Okay? So to look at it, we create this new agreement and then grow that channel and grow it like we were doing our original one. And if we can do that successfully, what we'll do is be able to preserve the relationship. We get that mutual vulnerability back because all intimate relationships need to and must have that. Erich Fromm talked of there's 4 basic elements common to love. That if you love something or somebody, you will find all of these elements in there. And I put that up because I think what you find is most of these elements in the recovery program, the 12 steps that we talk of. Care is actually one of their words. 3rd step, turn your will and life over to care. So that you must care about things, you must nurture them to try and grow them in those ways. responsibility. That if you love something, you're responsible for it, for its care, for its nurturing. And that means that when we're responsible, we're willing to put our own needs aside. So what we can do is then use that energy and give it to the relationship. The other is respect. It's a huge principle that we treat each other with respect and dignity. And in doing that, what gets created again is those byproducts we talked about: love, nurturing, intimacy. Okay? And the last one is knowledge. If you love someone or something, you want to know about it. So you kind of study it in those ways. You work with it in those ways. It's like if you're in love with somebody and they go to the butcher shop that day, you want to know what happened. Well, when you went to the butcher shop, what happened? Who'd you see there? All that stuff. And it really doesn't matter what you're talking about. It can be the butcher shop or anything else. But just the act of talking and communicating is one of the ways you nurture each other, and you let each other know that you care about them. I want to know about the details of your life because you're important to me. I want to know what you did in that way. Not in some kind of snoopy way, which might be when the addiction is there, out of that paranoia. But you want to know in that way just because you want to spend as much time with that person as possible. And just through that communication, there's a way where you carry them into your heart. Kind of going to end at this point of talking about this. And from here, what we'll do is go into, in a little bit, talking about recovery and how do we create this and how do families recover? How do they get this type of thing back?